Good morning, seventh graders. So this week we are on week 3 of distance learning. It's crazy that we've been doing this so long. I don't know about you guys, but it just feels really weird, and I still haven't gotten used to filming these videos instead of being in front of you guys live. But we're gonna make the best of it. We're getting through it. You guys are doing great turning in your assignments. I've seen a lot more people getting them in than we have in the past, so good job with that. Keep pushing along. I know it's hard, but we just gotta do it. So week 3, lesson 5, we are still in our unit about heroes. All right, so this week for your do now, the do now says, why do you think people were willing to risk their lives to work on the Underground Railroad? The sentence frame I have for you here is people were willing to risk their lives on the Underground Railroad because. I want you to go ahead and get a piece of paper if you don't have one already, pause this video, and then I want you to write down that sentence frame and answer this question for your do now. So you can pause this video, take a second, answer the question, and then we'll continue on. Pause. Cool. Hopefully you pause the video, you answer that question, thought about why people were willing to risk their lives on the Underground Railroad. Okay, so the Underground Railroad. For this, I want you to fill out a KWL chart about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. Now, KWL charts, we haven't done these before in class, so I want to introduce them to you. First of all, the Underground Railroad, you should remember from all of our reading with Frederick Douglass what that was. If you didn't, hopefully you thought about it, and when we did the do now, you may have looked up what it was so you could answer that question. But the Underground Railroad is a system where slaves would get to the north from the south, and it wasn't actually a railroad, it was a series of houses along the way. So hopefully that jogs your memory. But this KWL chart, you're going to have 3 columns here, and I want you to set up your piece of paper underneath your do now to look like mine. So the first one is this K, what I know box. The W box is what I wonder, and the L box is what I learned. Right now, you're only going to do these first 2 boxes, the K box and the W box. So you're going to write down everything you know about the Underground Railroad. I gave you an example here. It says Harriet was born into slavery. So we know that Harriet Tubman was born into slavery. That's something that we know is true, right? And then the Underground Railroad was, maybe that's a sentence frame for your next one. You don't have to use that, but I gave that to you in case you wanted it. And then there's also what I wonder. I gave you one question here. Where was the Underground Railroad located? Maybe you want to ask that. And then I gave you 2 sentence frames. You can say who, and then come up with a question. When, come up with a question. So anything about Harriet Tubman or the Underground Railroad that you know and that you wonder. So go ahead and take a second here, pause the video, and fill out that chart, just those first 2 boxes. All right, hopefully you wrote down all your knowing and all your wondering down in those 2 boxes. Okay, so now that we have talked about what we know, we've talked about what we wonder, we're gonna watch this short video to kind of start to fill in that what I learned box. So as you watch, I want you to add anything you learn about Harriet Tubman to your KWL chart under what I learned. So either as you watch, or I'll give you a second after we watch to fill that in, but I think it's easy to just have your piece of paper down, write it down as you are watching this video. If you miss anything, you can always go back to in the video and pause it so that you can rewatch that video again. All right.
Escaping slavery, risking everything to save her family, leading a military raid, championing the cause of women's suffrage. These are just a handful of the accomplishments of one of America's most courageous heroes. Harriet Tubman was born Araminta Ross in Dorchester County, Maryland, in the early 1820s. Born into chattel slavery, Araminta, or Minty, was the 5th of 9 children. 2 of Minty's older sisters were sold to a chain gang. Even as a small child, Minty was hired out to different owners who subjected her to whippings and punishment. Young Minty's life changed forever on an errand to a neighborhood store. There, an overseer threw a 2-pound weight at a fugitive enslaved person, missed, and struck Minty instead. Her injury caused her to experience sleeping spells, which we know of today as narcolepsy, for the rest of her life. Minty's owner tried to sell her, but there were no buyers for an enslaved person who fell into sleeping spells. She was instead put to work with her father, Ben Ross, who taught her how to lumber. Lumbering increased Minty's physical strength and put her in touch with free black sailors who shipped the wood to the north. From them, Minty learned about the secret communications that occurred along trade routes, information that would prove invaluable later in her life. In this mixed atmosphere of free and enslaved blacks working side by side, Minty met John Tubman, a free black man she married in 1844. After marriage, she renamed herself Harriet after her mother. Harriet Tubman's owner died in 1849. When his widow planned to sell off her enslaved human beings, Harriet feared she would be sold away from everyone she loved. She had heard of an underground railroad, a secret network of safe houses, boat captains, and wagon drivers willing to harbor fugitive enslaved people on their way north. So Tubman fled with two of her brothers, Ben and Harry. They eventually turned back, fearing they were lost. But in one of her sleeping spells, Harriet dreamed that she could fly like a bird. Looking down below, she saw the path to liberation, and in the autumn of 1849, she set out on her own, following the North Star to Pennsylvania and to freedom. Tubman returned to the South 13 times to free her niece, brothers, parents, and many others. She earned the nickname Black Moses and worked diligently with fellow abolitionists to help enslaved people escape, first to the North and later to Canada. Harriet Tubman worked as a Union Army nurse, scout, and spy during the Civil War. In 1863, she became the first woman in United States history to plan and lead a military raid, liberating nearly 700 enslaved persons in South Carolina. After the war, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution legally abolished slavery, while the 14th expanded citizenship and the 15th gave voting rights to formerly enslaved black men. But she was undaunted, and she persisted. She raised funds for formerly enslaved persons and helped build schools and a hospital on their behalf. In 1888, Tubman became more active in the fight for women's right to vote. In 1896, she appeared at the founding convention of the National Association of Colored Women in Washington, D.C., and later at a women's suffrage meeting in Rochester, New York. There she told the audience, "I was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, and I can say what many others cannot. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." As her fame grew, various friends and allies helped her in the fight to collect a veteran's pension for her service in the Union Army. In 1899, she was finally granted $20 a month. In a fitting twist of fate, the United States Treasury announced in 2016 that Tubman's image will appear on a redesigned $20 bill. Harriet Tubman died on March 10, 1913. Even on her deathbed at age 91, she kept the freedom of her people in mind. Her final words were, "I go away to prepare a place for you." If you're inspired by Harriet Tubman's life and work, we highly recommend the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Underground Railroad. This wildly inventive and courageous book follows protagonist Cora.
Okay, so we learned a little bit about Harriet Tubman in this that maybe you didn't know before. So what I want you to do is go back to that chart. Maybe you filled it out as you're watching, but if you didn't, make sure that you put a couple things in that what I learned box, just as many as you can. Something that I would say is maybe I didn't know that Harriet Tubman changed her name to Harriet Tubman, that she wasn't born that with that name. So maybe that's something I would put there. But you can put as many as you want. Fill up that box. At least 3, but I think you can do more. Okay, so once you finish that, I want you to think about what we're going to do next. So we're going to go to Common Lit, and we are going to read the article called The Underground Railroad. Your annotation task for today is, as you read, take notes on how the Underground Railroad helped slaves to freedom in the North. So we're looking for any time the article mentions helping slaves to freedom in the North or how the Underground Railroad helped slaves to freedom. So I'm going to head over to Common Lit just to read the start of this one with you guys. So it says up here, in the 1850s and 1860s, the United States became even more divided on the issue of slavery. States in the South still practiced slavery, while many states in the North prohibited slavery. As a result, many slaves tried to run away to freedom in the North. The Underground Railroad was established to provide a secret way for slaves to escape from slavery in the South to freedom in the North. As you read, take notes on how the Underground Railroad helped slaves to freedom in the North. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. I'm going to read a little bit with you. Any cause needs speakers and organizations. Any mass movement requires men and women of great ideas. But information and mobilization are not enough. To be successful, revolutionary change requires people of action, those who little by little chip away at the forces who stand in the way. Such were the conductors of the Underground Railroad. Not content to wait for laws to change or for slavery to implode itself, the railroad activists helped individual fugitive slaves find the light of freedom. The Underground Railroad was not an actual railroad, but was instead a network of safe houses and routes slaves could take to escape from the South to freedom in the North. Okay, there's a couple things I want to point out here. The first one are these definitions. Hopefully you guys have been able to see those in all my videos. I click on one. So this one, content, means like a state of peace. And then also it had implode, which means to self-destruct. The third one was a fugitive slave was someone who ran away from the slave owner and went into hiding to avoid being taken back. So those are a couple definitions. What I would do is I would just stop as I get to these and then click on it and then put that into the place of the word that you didn't know. So not content to wait for laws to change. I would say not in a state of peace or happiness to wait for laws to change. So they weren't happy. They didn't want to wait for laws to change. They wanted to get out now. Cool. So then after these first like two little paragraphs here is question number 1. So your first question of your guiding questions is, which statement characterizes the conductors on the Underground Railroad? A, they were patient and willing to wait for the laws to change. B, they were creative and able to build a railroad very quickly. C, they were dedicated and willing to begin a war to end slavery. Or D, they were people of action, carefully and wisely helping slaves to freedom. So what you'd have to do here is go back to the text, kind of reread it, see what the correct answer might be. Make sure you can find evidence to support that that's correct before you click on that. And then I want to look for one more thing here. I want to look for this last sentence of this. As you read, take notes on how the Underground Railroad helped slaves to freedom in the North. So when I come right here, it says the Underground Railroad was not an actual railroad, but was instead a network of safe houses and routes slaves could take to escape from the South to freedom in the North. So this kind of shows me that annotation task. So how the Underground Railroad helped slaves to freedom is that they would have a network of safe houses and routes. So I'm going to write right here just to remind myself. The railroad was not an actual train, but the slaves would stay at safe houses until they got to the North. So that's just one little note for me here. And what I want you to do is, if that is not working on your iPad, then what I want you to do is just write down your answer or write down that quote and then say your little gist statement about it. And then you can submit that onto Google Classroom so I can still see it. If you're able to do that on your Common Lit, on your iPad or however you're doing it, that's great, because when I grade it or when Mr. Longo grades it, we will both be able to see that. Okay, last thing. So it says, after reading, answer the assessment questions on Common Lit, then go to Google Classroom. I want you to remember you have to use evidence in your answers in order to get full credit. So when we look at our assessment questions right here, let's see. So this last one, what is the central idea of the text? Cite specific evidence from the text to support your answer. It's not just saying the second part just to say it. It wants you to cite specific evidence from the text. When Mr. Longo and I grade this, we cannot give you 100% if you don't answer the second part of the question. So if you just say the central idea of the text and it's one sentence, that's not going to get a 4. That's probably going to get a 1. So I want to make sure that you know I need you to cite specific evidence from the text to support the answer to that question, okay? And then after you finish those assessment questions, you're going to head to Google Classroom to answer the discussion question. Why do you think people were willing to risk their lives to work on the Underground Railroad? Do they deserve to be called heroes? Why or why not? Then I'm going to have you respond to one classmate. I gave you guys some sentence frames for how to do that a couple videos ago, but I'll just tell you really quickly now. And you need to say either, I agree because, or you need to say, I want to ask a question about something that they said maybe, or I disagree because. And if you're going to disagree with them, you probably should have some evidence in there to say why you're correct and why they're not correct. Okay. So that is it for this lesson. I want to remind you guys again also, if you're in third period or you're in fifth period, try to direct all of your questions to Mr. Longo. If you have any questions about the way your assignment was graded or anything like that, he is the one that's going to be grading third period and fifth period. So he's the one that's been grading all of your stuff and is going to keep grading your stuff. So if you have questions about grading, go to him. We make the assignments together, so you can ask either of us about that. But anything about grading, that is all going to go to Mr. Longo if you're in my third period or my fifth period. All right, make sure you guys come to office hours today, Monday at 1 o'clock with me and Mr. Longo. We will go through this lesson with you and help you guys answer the questions to make sure you're all getting 4s. It's basically like if you were doing this in class in like a 30-minute lesson, that is how we're going to go through it with you. So it's just like an easy time to do your homework for English. Basically getting all the help you would get in class from us instead of just being on your own. So if you've been getting 1s, 2s, even 3s on the last couple assignments, I suggest that you come to these office hours because we're going to help you go through the lesson to make sure you're going to get a 4 on it. And oh, one more thing. Everyone that's come to the office hours has done way better on all of the assignments that they've been to the office hours for. So just know that it is working for those people that are coming to the office hours. They are getting good scores on their assignments. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. It's up to you though, but we do want to see you guys and just help you through this. Okay, have a great rest of your day. I will talk to you soon. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Bye, guys.